Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our national Q&A call. We're going to get started right now with news you can use. The Renters' Bill of Rights. There's always a cause for the government to come and decide that we need some more regulation and some more things. And they have announced today that the White House has announced today that they are standing behind and writing currently a Renters' Bill of Rights to ease the tenant crisis. Now, I wasn't aware there was a tenant crisis. The heart of the article deals with the fact that rents keep going up. Unfortunately, these guys haven't read their own news. Rents have gone down about 14% in the last 6 months nationwide. They're not going up, they're going down. Nonetheless, they have announced a blueprint for a Renters' Bill of Rights. It's going to include the following at a minimum. They'll add to it once they decide to publish it. They argue that renters should have access to housing that is safe, decent, and affordable. No disagreement there. Have a clear and fair lease that has defined rental rates, rights, and responsibilities. I think that's actually probably a good thing. To know your rights and be protected from unlawful discrimination and exclusion. Now, when you read into the detail, part of that is going to include free lawyers to represent renters when it's time for eviction. So even if you're a landlord, you have a rightful eviction or rightful cause under which to evict somebody, you're going to end up fighting the U.S. government because they're going to supply lawyers, it looks like, to fight that. Number 4 on the list is be able to organize without harassment from housing providers or property managers. So also in the detail on that is basically federal government is authorizing trespass. In other words, it's illegal to trespass in the United States in every state except if you are a renter, and the government's going to cover this from that standpoint. So in other words, you will get legal defense if you decide to trespass on somebody else's property and protest. It has to be because of a protest. So if you want to trespass and break a window in somebody's house, just make sure you carry a sign that says unfair landlord beating our tenant, that kind of thing, whatever. This is just crazy stuff, but I don't make the news, I just report it. And finally, have access to resources that help them, renters, avoid eviction and avoid future instability. They are looking at a bill, not included with this, but they are looking at a bill that they talked about last year that will ban evictions. You won't be able to be evicted from a rental house. Now, what that's going to do is essentially wipe out, in my opinion, the rental market, the single-family home rental market for sure. Maybe not the apartment, but there's no landlord in the world that will want to rent under these kinds of new federal mandates. Some of the state stuff is goofy enough as it is. California's got some unusual stuff here, and some of it's good and some of it's bad, but a lot of it is crazy, whether it's good or bad. The stuff these guys can think of, it's amazing. But on a federal basis, if you essentially can no longer evict, and you automatically, if you're a landlord, one house and above, you allow everybody to trespass and to protest in your yard, and you have to fight any legal cause. The other side will be represented by a non gratis lawyer, a free lawyer for them. That's going to be a tough business to be in. I suspect that many of the 28 million single-family owned rental homes, single-family rentals that are owned by primarily mom and pop landlords, these things will be dumped on the market. So this could, and we're going to talk next week about, it looks like maybe the economy is starting to come back up again, which is good, really good news. But this will throw ice water, not just cold water, ice water on top of that whole deal, because no landlord in their right sense will, like I said, want to be a landlord under those kinds of provisions. You will become, in essence, an enemy of the state, of the United States of America, if you are a landlord. So for all of us who went out and did BRRRRs over the last few years, to have a household to rent or house to rent, because as they say, no good deed goes unpunished. That certainly is going to be some punishment coming up. A lot of this is couched in an executive order that will be signed by President Biden because it's his idea. And accordingly, it will not need any congressional approval. So they're claiming that we still are under a COVID crisis. And because of that, they can pass these kinds of extraordinary measures as executive orders. And so there is no oversight. In theory, the Constitution gives the chief executive of this country, the president of this country, some extraordinary powers in the case of a crisis. And they took a page out of the California playbook where all you do is just make sure there's some crisis at all times. And as long as there's a crisis going on, and it could be anything from, here in California, we've had fires to we've had some weather issues lately to, we had some heat and we had problems with not enough electricity in the state. Those are all reasons to call a national crisis, or in our case, a state crisis. And they'll take that information and they'll turn that into the ability of the executive in the state and now in the federal government to be able to pass, basically unilateral decisions on things like this, on this sweeping housing order. So it's crazy. We can't stop it. The only thing that can happen is somebody will challenge it before the Supreme Court. And, I would assume that this will interfere with the constitutional separation of the state from private contracts. Probably would take about 7 to 10 years to be ruled on, but it would probably eventually be ruled in the investor/landlord's favor. And I don't know how this would affect, there's still to come, because this news just came out this morning. There's still to come whether this is going to affect something like a lease option or if you are selling under a contract. I assume what this is going to probably do is from now on, nobody will want to own a rental, but they'll either ease out of rentals by selling them for cash, or they'll turn around and do something like a lease option or something like that may circumvent this kind of landlord law. So it's goofy, it's crazy, and it's here to stay, unfortunately. All right. Sorry I didn't have better news, but that is what it is.